Whether you love it or hate it, small pocket fixed blades are here to stay. They've become so popular, all our favorite brands are now pumping them out. Now, recent newcomer NAFS is no different, and the people behind the very popular Lander model have released this in a fixed blade form. This is the NAFS Lander 4 fixed blade. I've often heard the term, good things come in small packages. This might be the perfect example of that, as even though this knife is definitely on the smaller side, I was really surprised at how much I really enjoyed carrying it. This knife has been out for a little while now, yet it never really was truly on my radar for some reason. Yet when I was offered the chance to try this out in a trade, I thought why not, as one of my favorite EDC channels, High Winds EDC, really raves about this little knife, so I knew Alexander wouldn't steer me wrong. And spoiler alert, like always, he's onto something because this is a great little pocket fixed blade. So without further ado, let's take a closer, deeper dive into this new little fixed blade and see if it's worth the space in your pocket. Let's get into it. So some background first. NAFS kind of broke onto the scene a few years back as a brainchild of Ben Peterson, and they released several different models, all of the same folding knife called the Lander. This knife was extremely popular as it was really small, pocketable, still comfortable in hand, and also had the added benefit of being able to completely be open source. You were able to download and print your own 3D printed scales and easily swap them over. This led to the knife being extremely customizable and overall extremely popular. With this new popularity, this led to new models, such as the larger version with the upgraded lock to a crossbar lock on the Lander 2, then shrinking it back down the original size with the Lander 3. Yet all that innovation led us directly here. This is the Lander 4, the next up and arguably my favorite. Now this doesn't fold like its older siblings, this instead is strictly a pocket fixed blade. And don't get me wrong, I keep saying pocket fixed blade on purpose, because this is absolutely perfect for the pocket. Some fixed blades can be too large, and though marketed as something pocketable and concealable, they're instead much better off being worn on the belt. This is extremely small size, so it makes it perfect to toss in a pocket and forget about it. Now I keep mentioning the size, so how big or small is it? Well, this is coming in with just an overall length just under 6 inches at 5.9 inches. And this features a 2.6 inch drop point blade, which is just a smidge over 3 inches for the handle. So even with these really small specs, it's surprisingly comfortable and fits in my hand pretty well. Is it the most comfortable knife in the world? Of course not. But for being this small, it's surprising that I can get a full 4-finger grip here. There's also a lanyard hold here in the back with an attached lanyard, so you should slip back a little bit if you have larger hands than me. And real quick with the topic of lanyards, these ship with a pretty cool little bead here that, if I can recall correctly, was supposed to look like the Saturn V rocket booster, which I think is honestly pretty cool as it's just a tad different. So we covered the size already, but there's still so much more here. Now the most important thing, of course, is the blade. Though featuring just a little bit over 2.5 inches of cutting surface, this is coming in with everyone's favorite budget steel in the moment, which is 14C28N. I'm a pretty big fan of this steel as it's pretty corrosion resistant, so I don't really have to worry about rust or blemishes, especially with this really interesting moon dust finish that hides scratches and wear like a champ. And it's also pretty tough, so no worrying about chipping the blade. It's fairly easy to touch up, just you need to resharpen this down the road. Best of all, this blade steel doesn't add a lot to the price of this knife. They have this exact same knife with the same specs and dimensions, but the blade steel upgraded to S35VN, which is a pretty big upgrade, but it also comes with an upgraded cost of almost $45. So in this scenario, I much prefer a budget steel as the cost of entry is also much lower. And though this is nowhere near a large blade by any stretch of the imagination, it's still extremely capable and should handle almost anything you throw its way. There's a little bit of jimping here at the top of the spine, and I would have liked to see this continue up a little ways as it's pretty small. Still, due to how this knife kind of curves in the handle, your hand locks in a little bit further back, and it's shockingly comfortable again due to the small size. Again, I have small to medium-sized hands, so your mileage may vary. This also has canvas micarta scales, which has really great texture and provide a little bit more grip, which is again really helpful in a smaller knife like this. What's cool is this knife kind of follows that same path as its older sibling that I mentioned earlier, as the handle scales are easily removable, and you can just simply take a flathead screwdriver, pry bar, or even a large coin, and undo these 4 screws holding the scales in place, and swap them out if it's something you're interested in. I really like that you can make this knife how you want it to be. The only other thing to really talk about is the sheath, because a good fixed blade is only half the equation, as a sheath can make or break a knife. And this knife features a fine sheath. Not terrible, not great, just fine in my opinion. This is 2-piece Kydex construction in a pancake style, which has its own pros and cons. On the positive side, we have tons of mounting options here, and you can add an Ulti clip, soft loops, or even just use the plastic clip that comes standard with this, even though I am missing it as I picked it up secondhand. But the downside here is this sheath is pretty large and just so much wider than the knife, leading to a lot of unnecessary space in the pocket. I really much preferred a fold-over taco-style sheath like the one with this petrified fish bison here. With a sheath like this, it's just so much more smaller and easier to carry than something like this. And even though it's a bit larger than I would like, the retention here is still great, there's no rattle, and the knife pops out with a little push. I've actually been carrying this by simply just dropping it in the pocket and no attachments on the sheath whatsoever. It's not the quickest to deploy this way, but due to how thin this knife is, it works really well just up against my leg in my front right pocket, and I've been enjoying carrying it. Now I want to talk about value because this comes in at $75 currently, and you can easily spend so much more than this on a pocket fixed blade, but also so much less. So at the end of the day, is this worth your money? Right now, I'd kind of say yes and no. If you love the look, the slim profile, and the fun background of NAFs, I say it's a great small compact fixed blade. But looking at it from the other side, it's also a tad steep. This features rather budget materials, so you can often pick up a knife with these same specs at almost half the cost. If we bring back the petrified fish bison, this knife features the exact same blade steel, very similar size and footprint, yet comes in around just $30. And that's about $45 cheaper for almost the exact same knife, just minus the micarta scales and the fancy lanyard bead. So in looking at it that way, it's a little bit tougher of an argument. I feel like it really comes down to style and presentation. If you just really love the look of this knife, I think you'd be happy with it. But if you're looking for the best deal out there, you can find something very similar and save a few bucks. Overall, I've really enjoyed carrying this small fixed blade, but I don't think it's the perfect one for me. I find myself just a tad cramped on back here on the handle, and I find myself reaching for one of my larger knives. Unfortunately, it just kind of seems like a common trend with me trying out NAF's knives, from the Lander 2 to the Wee Banter, as there's so much hype around these knives, yet in hand, I just don't love them as much as I feel like I should. So what's your verdict? Is this something you'd carry? If not, I'd love to know what pocket fixed blade you'd recommend. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.